start today by making a pinch pot and getting familiar with the clay. Here we have some clay. It's from Bachang. I'm going to use the wire cutters to just slice off a piece. I'll put this out of the way here. Now the first thing we need to do is wedge the clay. And that gets the air bubbles out of the clay. Because in the end, if there's any bubbles in here, we're going to put it in the kiln and it will heat up. And you know what happens to air when it heats up. It has to escape somewhere. And so if you have air in your clay piece, it will explode in the kiln. Okay, so a simple way to wedge to get the air bubbles out is just to rotate it and slap it down. Now you can see the clay is a little bit wet. It's sticking to the table a little bit. That's okay. If you have the table a lot, you can wedge it on a board and the board will suck out the moisture a little bit, but you don't want it to suck out too much because then your clay will get cracky while you're working with it and you'll get frustrated. So I'm going to set this aside and then just keep wedging right here. And I would do this about 40 times. This is a pretty basic way to wedge. When you're working and you're wedging, it's good not to make the table a drum and instead wedge right on top of a leg of a table so the whole room isn't exploding with noise, so you can work over on the edge of the table. A more advanced way of wedging, you push the clay down a little bit and rotate it and push it down and rotate it and push it down without folding it over on top of each other because that will make an air bubble. You just push it down, push it down, push it down. This way of wedging, you're pushing in. You can go ahead and give this a try if you want to feel more advanced. This wedging is called the ram's head because you'll see it starts to look like a ram's head with the coils here. Another way to wedge is just to push it a little bit, kind of keep it in a triangular shape, kind of pyramid, and move it and push it down and move it, and you're encouraging all the air to come out to the surface and leave the clay. Now you can see I have a lot of clay on the table. You can scrape it off with a wood tool, one of your wood tools. If you are annoyed with that surface, and you can work again on the wood board and just wedge it. So think about 40 times rotating it around or 40 times slapping it down. That should be about good. You keep control of the shape. Okay, so what we're gonna do is make a pinch pot. This, I think, is still too much to work with a pinch pot. You want smaller than a baseball size. And you wanna start with a spear. And you can just slap the clay into the shape you want it. You control the clay and the shape of the clay. Okay, this is something that you've done since you were in elementary school in art class. So try and channel back to that. Start by determining the inside of the pinch pot, and then you pinch around. And you pinch from the bottom up, and you try and keep the walls of your pinch pot even width. You can hold it in your hand. This is like a good focusing technique. You shouldn't be talking to your neighbors while you're doing this. You're really focusing on smoothing out the inside, getting a nice smooth inside, and even walls. Just pinching it into shape and keeping it controlled in your hand. If you start pinching outwards, your walls will start to collapse. So I'm just kind of rotating it around, pinching it, trying to make sure the bottom of my pot is also the same width as my walls, so it's not really heavy on the bottom of the pot and smooth on the inside. So here's some sample pinch pots. You can see it's nice and smooth on the outside. It's all wet. Nice and smooth on the outside. For higher quality, to really push yourself, try and make your walls as thin as you can. Think of it like eggshells, but still keeping their form without falling apart. Here's another one. We'll glaze the inside and the outside of these if you want. So here's, you can see the outside has some texture in there, and then some glaze on the inside. We're gonna add texture to our pot in just a minute. It's okay if it's kind of roly-poly, or if it sits, this one sits better. So push yourself to make your walls even and as thin as you can handle without your pot collapsing. So you're going for something like this. Now, to make anything in clay look more interesting, you'll add texture to it. And you can add texture to it with any of our clay tools. This is called a loop tool, and there's a lot of variations on the loop tool. These are called wooden tools, and there's lots of different wooden tools that you can use. And this is called the needle tool or the pointer tool, and sometimes we use a toothpick instead of this. If you're acting a little unsafe with this, you'll switch over to a toothpick. You want to make sure that this is really pointy, so you don't want to poke your eye out with it, is our fear. But you can add texture in creative ways with these tools. There's a bumpy edge here too, you can roll that on. There are, you can get texture from all sorts of things. You just have to be creative. So with the loop tool, if you use this on the side, you can get like fish scales. And you can cover your whole pot with texture. Now this looks really nice when we glaze it and the glaze gets in the texture. You can see some examples here, a little dirty. But where the glaze reacts differently within the texture, and you get some nice variety in there. Okay, so go ahead and add texture to your pinch pot. The very last thing before you're finished is to turn it over and write your name on it. You can write it with a pencil, you can write it with a needle tool. Make sure you put your full name though, not just your initials. I'm putting Miss Graham. Because we'll have a lot of pinch pots floating around and we want to make sure we get yours to you. When you're done then, you can go put it on the wooden board and we'll let it dry.